Good morning. We're running on time as usual. Our electronic world, which is fitting because we're going to be talking about that. So hope everybody's doing well. It's a beautiful day, thanks to global warming. And it's nice to be out here together. And welcome. We had our family and friends gathering earlier. And one of the things we talked about is the upcoming holidays. And I asked some trivia questions. Let me ask you. So what year did the Pilgrims and Puritans, two different groups of people, arrive at Plymouth Rock? No, that was Christopher Columbus. 1623, that was Jamestown. 1610, you got it right. I just made that up. Okay, another one, ready? Who made Thanksgiving a federal holiday?
President Lincoln.
Very good. That is exactly correct. Abraham Lincoln signed into law because he thought the nation was being pulled apart, and we thought it'd be good for us to celebrate what it means to be American. Now, here's an interesting question. 1610, of course, arrival in there. 1623, Jamestown, starting of that. In what year did the Spanish form cities in the west of the United States? 1592. So way before that. So we tell one story, of course, we tell the story of the Puritans and the Pilgrims, although they were nowhere near the first people, and there were already people here when they got here, yeah, you're reading a book about that, yeah, Native Americans. So, but it is good, I think, that we did have a holiday celebrating Thanksgiving. I think that's important. It's a life stance. We talked about how many you go to Europe and you go to tip and then you realize that's really not the custom there, right? We feel like we have to. And it's getting very expensive to tip, isn't it? It's getting out of control in this country. But we also know that people aren't making anywhere near enough money. And that's why we have to do that, because we're not really paying the full fare for stuff.
Spoke to a woman in South Africa yesterday. I called my insurance company and I get somebody in South Africa and they are celebrating Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, so other countries now have adopted other kinds of forms of Thanksgiving and versions of that as well. So she just mentioned how in other countries like South Africa, people celebrate Thanksgiving and their own forms from that. Canada has a kind of a similar day, Thanksgiving Day. So we were talking to the kids about, the young adults, about a culture of gratitude and a culture of giving thanks, and to what extent we do that. I told them when I first moved to New York, I'd go to checkout counters and I would sit there and nobody said anything to me. And I'd just put my food and they'd check it up and then they'd look at me and I'd look at them and they'd look at me and I'd look at them. And because I didn't know what was going on. Because no one said, hi, how are you doing? Good to see you. Oh, I saw you got the orange juice. That's on sale. And didn't go through the thousands of questions that people in the South would have done, and including saying that'll be $33.63. And a lot of times people ring you up and look at you. And I was not used to that custom. And I just looked at them because what am I supposed to do? You didn't tell me the price. And so that was just showed. And it just shows differences in cultures and things like that, the way we have. So we're talking about expressing gratitude and thanks. We're heading into Thanksgiving week. Everybody hopefully is going to be doing something fun and eating way too much food, which luckily we live in a nation we could do that. And I thought it was important that we express and create our culture, or affirm our culture of thanks and giving thanks by thanking someone for just a moment. So I'm going to call up Diane Kozarski, who's busy disturbing the entire class with gossip on the side. So Diane, please come up here. Do you want to share what you shared with Alfina? If not, we had to have you behind class. Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
I was telling Alfina an anecdote about the first time I went with my husband to California, and we just run into a little grocery store to get some oranges and out again. But the clerk was from the South and he said, hi, how are you? Are you new around here? Aren't these great? And I was like,
yes.
Yes. And I thought, oh, this is really different. I'm from the Northeast.
Yes, and if it doesn't take you an hour to check out, you're not in a good store. So there you go.
So I was reflecting and absorbing your message and sharing, and I couldn't restrain myself.
So the aesthetic committee went through a tremendous amount of work to work on the chairs that you were sitting on. Where are you going? Come back here. I wasn't punishing you. Thank you, Diane. Went through a tremendous amount of work. There are three things you should never talk about, which are, and I'm sticking in aesthetics, right? Because one thing we all disagree on is what is beautiful, what is pretty. Anyone who takes that on should be well prepared for that. And Diane did a phenomenal job with her committee. And who all was on your committee?
Javier Valencia, Eric Sandhusen, Jim Norman gave great advice.
B. It's a B component.
Amy Bland. Bly,
Bly.
Amy Bly, yes, thank you.
And
I mentioned
and
Eric.
yeah. So they went through this whole process. We knew we needed new chairs. You were sitting on, do you like the new chairs? Much more comfortable? As we have spread over our lives, these are slightly bigger chairs. Now, but they're also way more comfortable than what we had before. And one person then kind of really took the lead, kept showing us color samples, ordered chairs to bring them in. And so you could sit on them, arrange for us to put up a dining table so that we could sit around the chairs, had conversations about that, did presentations on it. And that was Diane Kozarski. She went to a tremendous amount of work, including finally going through the whole process of saying to the board about the chairs, getting them funded, helping to arrange with David the delivery date and all this kind of stuff. And then making sure everything happened for all of this process. And we just want to say thank you. That was a difficult process. That was a lot of work.
Oh, gosh, I'm amazed.
You saying it from the bottom of our bottoms, Eric said, and for being so gracious about it, because people can get really touched with that, and that's for you. So
wow.
it's like winning the Academy Award. You get 1 second before I take the hook and yank you off.
Okay. Well, if you have a little OCD in your personality, join the building committee, because I didn't want to be sitting here in a building full of ugly stuff. So I
There we go.
pitched in.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Without further ado, I will turn it over to Kurt for our affirmation of ethical naturalism. We are going to move right into our gathering address because we have the membership meeting. So we're going to skip, as it says in your program, the affirmation of ethical naturalism and go right into our gathering address called the Algorithms of Peace. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay online?
Yes, we can.
So part of what we've been doing is a 3-part series on kind of conditions for peace. We talked about the importance of public spaces and public lands and how that is crucial for communities for lots of reasons. And an area where there are multiple narratives, it gives places for people to pull to one spot. And we're losing some of those public spaces. We don't have that center piece anymore, where we used to all would have maybe have gone to the plaza in the middle of town and all sat around, or even the coffee shop. And some of that is because of the pandemic, which caused a big blow to that. But it also just because we don't have those communal spaces that we used to have. We have this, we have Zoom, luckily. And then, but some people also realize that it's also great to be in the person with other people as well. So we're trying to find those connected. That was the first one. Then we had the woman from Cooper Hewitt, whose name now just escaped me.
Cynthia Smith.
Wow, Cynthia Smith, thank you so much, who also came in. She's been pursuing a body of research and curating, designing for peace, and looked at all the different ways that peace can be done through all of those various avenues. And today we're going to be talking about a different kind of design for peace, which is our highly digital space as well. Paolo gave that great talk, as he does annually, kind of updating us and talking about AI. So we know artificial intelligence is now coming more into the public space. And this is concerning for many different reasons. I'm going to talk about those in a second. But the first thing is I want to remind us that if you remember on October 30th in 1938, How many of you celebrate the day that the aliens landed in New Jersey and started killing large numbers of people? It was a horrible incident here in New Jersey, right? Anyone, you're 1938, I don't know, anybody? It was beginning the War of the Worlds to happen. It happened right here in all places of the world. The aliens arrived in New Jersey. That made sense to them. Huh? South Jersey, yes. Well, that's, yeah. North Jersey would have been, I mean, where do you find parking in North Jersey? So, you know, that would have been the thing. So what was interesting is that it caused a huge panic on the East Coast. This was a brand new radio show that had gotten started, something called CBS broadcast this show. Orson Welles, no relation to H.G. Wells, he used the story War of the Worlds, which is from the 1800s. Orson Welles thought, how do we take this dusty old series and make it interesting? So starting, this was the 17th episode. The first episode was actually Dracula. I didn't remember Mass Panic around there, but maybe I'm wrong. There's something interesting. So all of these, there was a 17th episode. In the 17th episode, he said, let's make it fun. We're going to make it like a newscast, right? So that's the thing that got started. But it was the same time, same hour, same everything for the CBS radio show program, and it caused mass panic. In fact, they've tried to research how many people actually believe that story. Does anyone remember their parents believing that story, talking about that? None of your parents, no, right? But they,
My grandmother,
who?
my grandmother,
Your grandfather believed it, right?
yes.
Did he tell the story? What did he do?
He went and tried to leave the city.
He went and tried to leave the city, as did large numbers of people. In fact, they took Orson Welles to court over this because that, luckily, he wasn't convicted. But they basically said, yeah, you started mass panic. And they're trying to figure out how many people actually believe the story. And it was 1 million people, they think, at least in the broadcast area. Over time, and they've done research and statistical sampling to figure out how many people actually believe that story, close to 1 million people. So here's a question I'm going to have Eric pass around the mic, and then Susan, you're going to ask some people online. Why did 1 million people thought that aliens had landed in New Jersey to come and attack us? And what is it about us that we believed that story? It sounds so far-fetched to us today, but 1 million people believed it was happening. What maybe helped, what conditions helped maybe people to think about that? So, Anne.
So I think that was in the days when people actually believed what the press and the radio told them, and they were not used to thinking critically about the information that was being given to them.
Good. We can all go home. Anne's got it all right there, right? They believed what the media was telling them, and they didn't right. But still, aliens landing. Yeah, so I think that was certainly a piece of it. We had a great news thing. Sylvia, I saw her hand go. Oh, okay. I mean, Sally, I'm sorry. Esther.
As I understand the situation, there was another show that was very popular, but it was very boring that week. And a lot of people got about 10 minutes into their show, and then they started flipping around the dial. And by that time, the War of the Worlds was decontextualized. You know, it was, I think they had a warning at the beginning saying it was fiction. And so by the time people turned, what they heard was a panicking newscaster reporting on this terrible event that was happening. And you couldn't see necessarily where you were in the dial. You just heard this and you stopped and you believed it.
So people didn't have the disclaimer that was right there. Carol and then Diane, and we'll take some online, Susan, after that.
Okay.
Because the actors were very good. When you're on the stage and you speak to the audience, you have to make them believe that what you are saying is true.
Yep. So the actors conveyed that era of authority. They pretended to be military people. They pretended to be scientists, right? All these, what do we call, appeals to authority worked. Diane? And then online?
I did we went to a recreation of that broadcast. So then I did some reading about it. And apparently all summer there had been dire news from Europe coming to you over your radio. agreement and other warnings. And several times there were like sort of interruptions in the regular flow of news. So this was like, everyone had been kind of primed for
Yeah.
like, eek, disaster, war is about to break out.
We were already on guard and primed for things that were appearing in newsreels and other kinds of things like that, and on the radio. And people, we were also more kind of just worried about what things were going on. Susan, you want to ask
That's
people?
what I was going to say. We do have a couple of comments. Ken Karp says the herding instinct. So herding together, it sounds like everybody's doing it. I must do it. Carol and Jonathan, the illusion of authority is a favored tactic of advertisers to this day.
The illusion of authority. I think that is well point for certain. And anyone else online?
We have no other hands.
Yeah, so all of those things that you pointed out, certainly people, when they research and look at these things about why misinformation is so powerful on us. And you mentioned about that appeal to authority. You know, we believed people, we trusted them, or at least they announced themselves as scientists. They announced themselves as health officials or military people and things like that. And we didn't say, are you really? We didn't really do that because at the time, even at that period, people didn't do that, but we still do that to this day, right? There are two websites actually from the American Academy of Pediatricians and the Committee on Pediatric Health in the US kind of stuff. Both have all this information, good stuff for parents, well-documented websites and everything kind of stuff, and lots of things in there. It's not till later that we realized that the other website got started because they disagreed about thinking that LGBTQ youth is normal. And so they created their own website to be able to say that it was not normal, right? And because of the scientific community. And so people have all these kind of sources of information, but there's also fake experts, or people who can do those things. There were eyewitnesses, right? We're all told that 3 out of 4 doctors say, and that person's never a doctor. And now they have to put on the bottom, this person's not a doctor, is a paid actor, right? Because people thought, oh, that must be a dentist. He looks really great and he must be a dentist and things like that. And we're also vulnerable because we are in a rapidly changing world. We hear wild things in the news all the time about technology, and to a certain extent, we kind of fall victim to that kind of stuff. So the Pointer Institute that I've been working with and hoping to bring these series of workshops and stuff, and Stanford Media have looked at all this kind of different stuff about our media biases. And we're going to look at a couple of those right there. But I'm going to throw out some terms that occasionally I mix them up and they are used interchangeably. But sometimes it's misinformation, which is unintentional, incorrect information. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's unintentional. We're going to look at media sources that have a lot of those kinds of stuff. But there's also disinformation. So misinformation, disinformation, which is information that is wrong on a purpose. And there's quite a bit of that here in the United States. There are also fake news, lots of fake news, and we're going to talk about why there's so much of that. And some of that fake news is hidden as hate speech. You may have just recently heard that Elon Musk, once again, for the nth time, sent around a liked a text and said, yes, it is the Jews who are causing white hatred in America. Elon Musk just said that like yesterday. Everybody got very upset with that. And then you realize he said that like 10 times. The guy clearly is anti-Semitic. And even though he says, oh, I'm not anti-Semitic, I love people, which to me is disinformation. And there's also, of course, propaganda. Do you think our government feeds us propaganda? Our government does. Other governments do. Corporations do. Things like that. There's a lot of that. And we sometimes have to be able to sort that out. The problem is that we're not good at sorting out that information. We are a species that developed to rely on information. No claws, no strong teeth, can't run very fast. Children have to be reared for years before they can survive on their own. We were a species that developed to use information. We have our culture. Our culture is how we survived because we didn't have all these things. And we rely on large amounts of information. Don't eat that. that rustling in the noise means a tiger's coming. If you do this, you will die, and those kinds of stuff. And we evolved because we need information, which is why we're so, in a way, vulnerable to it when disinformation or misinformation or propaganda and all these things they could do. And it's also because we rely so much on information, right? We have a lot of biases towards information. Right now there is, you've all heard the famous thing where people see the Virgin Mary in toasted bread. There was a piece of bread that came out of a toaster that looked like the Virgin Mary, and people swore it was the Virgin Mary. Now it's there's a famous statue, just came in the news yesterday because I'm a news junkie, about a Virgin Mary statue, once again, that's crying. Virgin Mary statues seem to spend a lot of time crying, and people are now flocking to this because of the moisture that they sold in the statue. And so what Michael Shermer says is we're pattern-seeking animals. We look for patterns, and even when we're not there, we see faces in the sky. We all did that as a kid. Lay down, look at the clouds. Look, there's a giant fish, there's a whale. We see patterns and call them things even when they don't exist, which is the appeal to ghosts and witches and things like that, because we see things that happen, and we're such a species so dependent upon information that we even make up stuff when it's not there, and we're vulnerable to it. So, for example, how many of you have searched online and found a website? I'm going to buy a toaster oven. I want to know what is the best toaster oven. I'm going to go to a website, and it's going to list independently what are all those toaster ovens. How many of you have searched for items using a website like that? How many of you realize that that was created by the toaster oven companies that make those toaster ovens, and those are fake news where they're just basically ranking things? There's one agency, there are a couple of agencies that we trust. One is Consumer Reports. Are they completely unbiased? They have their own biases. Where's the headquarters of Consumer Reports? Yonkers, New York. Did y'all know that? I used to drive past their building all the time, and they had like a staff of 7, and that staff of 7, right, did all those kinds of stuff. And so some of the bias had to do, they say, with how much they could test, how much staff they had. They have more staff than that, but as an example. Now you own Consumer Reports. Yeah, we trusted that. And now a lot of people go online and they say, I want to know what is the best thing. I do that all the time too. And yet majority of those, when you go and look at actually who created that, the people who create that are the people who are manufacturing it. And guess whose products tend to show up towards the front? But we think it's being fair because they're saying that it's just going to be presented that way. We think it's unbiased and they're just going to give us a fair accounting of that. And it's not at all. And then what's interesting is even how professional the website looks like. They did a study. They had several different websites. Some were clearly disinformation or propaganda, and others were just really good, fair and balanced media type of thing. And they asked people which one they thought was the better. And 46% of the time people said it's obviously this website because it looks better, right? It's got a fake information of statistic. It's got a couple of bar graphs and all that information. At 46% of the time, people judge that website to be smarter than that.
So, I think they say information provided by manufacturer.
Right, hopefully they do that. Yeah. Yeah, and newspapers, they'll say sponsored content, and then usually that's when we knew that. But those websites, which are just like the top 10 rankings, they don't put that in there because they're just giving you their advice. We think ours should be in the top 3, and then you can buy anything else after that. We're going to tell you why we don't think you should buy that, and why this other company is a little bit better for that. So we have all of these kinds of stuff. They asked a bunch of, and do you think teenagers are pretty good at being duped by websites? Heavily so, right? Appeals to authority, sports figures, and all this kind of stuff. And they say that when they presented the same thing to teenagers, the whopping majority of teenagers say the reason that's a good website is it looks better than that website. Until they did the same thing with college historians and found the same level. College historians were no better at figuring these things out than teenagers. So we think teenagers are easily duped. But we don't often think about that. So, but there are a lot of other things. For example, the MediaWise talks about examples of appeals to others are based on how smart they seem or how well they're connected or their information and giving like that. There was a chart that went on by saying that minimum wage is not good for America. Here are the reasons why. They had all this information. It's this does this and this did this and this does this and all this kind of stuff. And 76% of the people, when they saw that website, said it was fair and balanced until they pointed out that that was Shell Oil Company that had created that whole website against minimum wage, right? And so all that information, of course, is to come back to say why they were against minimum wage. And we fall for that all of the time, right? So there's an interesting thing I got to let you in on. And here's a secret. Don't tell anybody else. People use misinformation and disinformation to sell you things.
What?
Shocking. I know. Highly, highly shocking to do that. But did you know how that works? There is a large segment of the US population that makes money, a large segment of the US population that makes money off of you clicking on their sites, right? If you can do this yourself, you can go and you can set up a YouTube channel. And if you put all these interesting videos out there and people will visit your site. Now, if you get to 1,000 likes, you ever watch a YouTube video and at the end they say, like my show, because they're trying to get paid for that and for good reason. Sometimes they want the money to continue the good work that they're doing. And so you hit like then gets them up to the 1,000. When they break the 1,000 threshold or whatever it is new it's going to be, then they get monetized for that website. So every time you're listening to it, all the stuff, you advertisers will start giving them money because now they know they have an audience of 1,000 people who find this interesting. That's a valuable find. Imagine if we found a website that had 1,000 people who love boring people talking about ethics every single Sunday morning and standing up here, they would go and they'd like that, right? We could make money off it. David, make that happen, please. So we could do that and you'd make the show. Here's the problem. We put videos out all the time. I check how many people look at those videos. How many people look at our videos? Do you have any idea, David? No. Is Ken, is Terry around? How many people look at our videos, Ken?
I don't have the figures, but it's probably, could easily be single digits per video.
Yeah, 4 or 5 people. I look at one of my most popular videos, I think it's 143. Yeah, Orion, did you have some? Yeah, 20 people look at the videos and kind of stuff. We're not going to make a lot of money, unfortunately, because you people are not liking and doing our kind of stuff and clicking on that.
Kurt, Ken was trying to respond.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. That's of those very few numbers. Some of them are us in the society checking out, posting the video, checking out the video, and so forth. Very few of those are external.
Didn't quite hear that. Say that one more time, Ken, a little louder.
So of those very few people who are viewing the videos, some of those are internal staff, the people that put the video
The first
up.
20 are me just watching myself.
Exactly.
So I go, God, he's so smart. Like, why don't more people listen to the show? It's great. Yeah. So here's the deal. People do this. They're trying to make money. And you're some part of town. You're trying to make a side gig, as they call it. And a lot of people do this. Instagram, TikTok, they all have their standards. You get to a certain number of people and you can start to monetize your website. And advertisers may even start to pay you money, like these influencers. Like there are several young people extremely popular online. They're doing everything like how to apply makeup. And then someone like Sephora comes along and says, wow, we love what you're doing. Love the fact that you're using our product. We'll pay you money to continue to do that. And of course, they boost it anymore. And people make a lot of money in the millions of dollars off this.
They're beautiful models.
Yeah, such beautiful. Well, it helps if you're 16 years of age, right? Yeah, the beautiful skin is 16. This is going to make you look so much healthier. And I'm like, you're 16. Get out of here. You know nothing. Come back when you look like this, right? So here's the thing is, if you don't get anybody to come to your video, what can you do? Or Sylvia said, lie to them or tell them what they want to hear. Yeah, was hopefully they're probably doing that. Or outrage. Be so outrageous, so over the top, be so filled with whatever you want to do and throw it out there that you attract 10,000 people to that. Does that happen? Extensively, right? Our media is filled with outrage, And some of us share it with each other. I see people send things like, this is an outrage, this is so upsetting, and we send things around to each other, which is fine. Sometimes we need to do that because stuff is outrageous. But part of that is to understand that people are using outrage to drive traffic to their website. The very famous example of that was a young man up in Maine. He was interviewed for the New York Times. He wrote all these horrible things about liberals, right? Complete amounts of disinformation, and kind of like the QAnon crazy crap out there you hear of everything from people sacrificing babies and all this kind of stuff. And they came to him and they finally found the guy who was generating all this kind of stuff. And he was one of the biggest liberal people you met in town. And he said, they asked him, why are you doing this? He says, because it makes money. Because people click on that. That's how I make money. I'm in a small town. I'm going to generate outrage. And he said that. And people click on this crap and send it around. And so a lot of what you're seeing out there that's so upsetting, it's so outrageous, you got to understand is being directed towards you and is run by algorithms. You've all seen this. I search for something to buy on my computer, and sure enough, 30 minutes later, it shows up on my cell phone. Right when I'm going to the news, like, oh, that's interesting. They're looking for this too. They must, everybody must be looking about this stuff. Now, when I have news feeds on my phone and things like that, like some of you probably do, 90% of the stuff, of course, is about science. Aren't you tired of all the science that comes through your news feed? Silence in the room. Why? Because I click on science articles. All right, I'm clicking extensively. I'm a geeky kind of guy. I click on all these things from fusion energy and all this good stuff. And sure enough, everything that pops up on every single one of my news feeds is science stuff, all outrageous. But yeah, and then I get involved in that and click into that. You are being fed information, sometimes not even maliciously, by computers who are trying to find, how do I custom this just for Gwen? Gwen, what do you search for online? Hang on.
I mean, anything, LL Bean clothing, books, whatever, but if it says sponsored, I go past that till one is not sponsored.
That's right. So let's go back to LL Bean. Do you see things then from Patagonia that kind of pops up, or maybe REI or something like that, right? Because as soon as you go into that one or two categories, they figured out, because they're looking at all the other things that you looked at, that she's probably a woman of certain age living in a certain part of the country who does these kinds of activities. And then of the entire amount of information you could be fed worldwide, they are going to show you the thin slice that responds just to you, because they're trying to get you as a consumer, right? And that's how these things are designed, to do those kinds of stuff. You are being fed information on your computer. And it's so upsetting to think about that the information that's coming to you, and you see it more and more by the fact of the ads that pop up, but you're also being fed the same political party. A young lady did this for a science experiment. She opened two Twitter accounts, now called X, right? Which should be X'd off the map because it's owned by Musk. She opened one and she only followed liberal news and clicked on things like the Democratic National Convention and things like that. And the other, she only clicked on conservative news, following the Republican National Party and some other things. And then she did a document of the amount of just random tweets that appeared in her news feed. And what would you imagine? The liberal only got fed liberal news. That was it. And liberal outrage. And the conservatives only got fed conservative stuff and conservative outrage. So we're getting all this kind of information and disinformation that's coming to us, partially because that's how people make money. Now, writers have always done this. Advertisers have always done this, right? Media has always done that, but to a certain extent, we kind of knew where they're coming from and why they were doing that. In fact, let's look at some of your news sources. I asked Susan to bring up a very good website called Ad Fontes, and this is your media bias. We're going to share this. So this is a very interesting chart. I'm going to move over here in front of the TV screen. So this chart shows almost all of the news and media, major media sources that frequently are visited by Americans. This over here is left-leaning, and this over here is right-leaning. These people tend to check a lot of facts, up to about 48%. That's considered the high.
I'm sorry, David, could we ask you to move the camera? We can't actually, the Zoom audience can't really see what Kurt is pointing to.
There's no way to do side by side either, right?
Well, it's up to the individual person to do it, but
Okay.
describe where you're pointing.
Yeah, so on if you're looking at the chart, everything to the left obviously leans left. Everything that's on the right.
David, just move the camera over here so they can see where they're.
Yeah, but they're all saying the same thing. It's yeah. And then everything that moves towards the top shows how much they consistently check every single fact that comes through. Every single fact. And you know you're great when you can hit about 50% of the time they're checking the facts. Down to some of these groups who only check their facts about down towards the bottom of this red dotted line here, hardly ever check your facts. So give me a news source you really trust. Fox News, you said? Okay. Let's go over to Fox News, and I think I'll use that one. Right. So the reliability, which means how often they check their facts, is about 36% of the time. Right? 36% of the time, something showed. That may be surprising of you because usually Fox News doesn't do that and is a well-trusted news source because it's fair and balanced, right? It also has a right media bias of, they say, about 11 points on their scale from zeros kind of stuff. Right? So we could say that this goes to, how many of you like Rachel Maddows? Let's go to the far other side of there. Rachel Maddow show. Reliability, 36% of the time they check their facts. And is it far left or far right?
Right.
Chris Hayes, All In. Do you see that one? Yeah. All In, down at the bottom. Come down, Susan. Click on All In. Nope, a little higher. Higher. There you go. All In, 22% fact checking. Liberal bias, obviously, minus 18, pretty liberal. That's a liberal show for liberal people who don't really need to check the facts because we all know the facts. And the Times, New York Times, I think is center. Where do you see that?
Right above the 40, but I think it's for something else.
Yeah. How many of you look at the Hill? There we go. There's New York Times. Let's go to New York Times. New York Times is pretty good. Reliability of 42%, almost half the time they're checking the facts. That's actually considered pretty good because there's a lot of facts that we cannot check because their opinion and things like that. And so they're not checking everything like that. And it has a left-leaning bias, which may surprise you, of about 7, but supposedly they're a little bit there. Anyone else?
We have a raised hand on Zoom.
Go ahead, Susan.
Go ahead, Ken.
Question for you, Kurt.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tease it out from what I see going down the left, but is there a distinction between opinion versus news in this chart?
Yeah. So even if it's opinion, the question is even if it's opinion, are they going to check? No, it's obviously opinion, and it's going to do that. But if they do spout a fact, how often is the fact checked to be something reliable and reasonable about that? In fact, there are some, and you could zoom in on this. Click on the Daily Beast. Some of you may read that. And you could zoom in a little bit, Susan, by kind of spreading your fingers apart. Is that how you can zoom in or no?
Not on my computer.
All right. But you can actually zoom in.
That's fake news.
The Daily Beast, another good one. Reliability about 33% of the time. That has a lot of opinion pieces into it as well. Bye, Samantha. And so there is a bias, right? It's the main thing is to say that there is bias, and not even all the news sources, we can stop sharing, not even all.
We
the
have
news
one,
sources-
we have another raised hand.
Go ahead.
Rich, unmute.
Hi, Kurt. I was just wondering if BBC or BBC America's in there anywhere.
NBC is center. Yeah, they're way up here into the center. They're actually pretty good if you watch BBC News.
Yeah.
For some reason, Alex Jones is way over here on the bottom right-hand side and just got charged with $1 billion for creating disinformation, propaganda, and hate speech and got slammed for that. Yes, Jim.
The microphone, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested if you or Susan can zoom in on the one toward the middle on the right side that says RT in the green box. I noticed that that's on the right side. What is it?
Russia Today.
Russia Today.
Yes.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Not RTE, which is a European news agency. RTE is considered more fair and balanced. In fact, RTE is somewhere up in here, but we don't get RT in America. When you're in Europe, that's what that's like their CNN to a certain extent. Yes, back there. So this ad fontes is, there's two of them that can be used. One's called mediabias.org, which is very good. But sometimes the media companies pay independent researchers themselves in order to show that they're actually more fair and more biased. And that's a big selling point. Ad fontes, and you can read all about them, and I'll send you all the link who are interested. It can provide a lot of information, but they're actually paid by independent news sources to figure out what is our bias, how often do we check our facts, and they're fact-checking.org. Yeah, right here, Gwen.
Website there, like something interactive media. So what was the first word of that?
AD.
Oh, okay. AD/.
Yes.
Interactive.
AD Fontes.
Fontes. Okay.
FONTES. That's the name of the website you just saw. But there's different versions of that. How many of you use Snopes? How many of you know what Snopes is? A lot of you. Good. I thought that would be true of this room. Snopes is a great place to check something. PolitiFact, run by the Poynter Institute, right? That's there, and several media groups. They're actually good fact checkers to do this, to provide this information. And so there's a lot of things that we can do to get to that we're going to be trying to present. The Ethical Society is creating something called the Media Task Force. And the purpose of the Media Task Force is to create some information that we could share with our people, where to find sources, how to check sources, how to think about these things. And we're hoping that some of you will participate in these free workshops. One of them, the two of them are led by me. One of them is going to be led by Alan Broadman, who is going to be one of our newest members, who teaches this in high school, but it also is independently interested in as well. And it's a way for all us to come together to talk about this. So, yes.
There's one area that you didn't include. I spent a lot of my career as Minister of Propaganda and Denial for the New York City Department of Probation. That's a public information officer.
Yeah.
Now, I use that term, the commissioners hated it, but the reporters respected it. They respected it because one of the things that I was is very real with them. And I was able to generate a lot of stories for positive reasons.
Yep.
To give money and finance to things that work. But also the whole political system is often based on denial or propaganda in order to enhance the mayor, the president, people in political power. It's very effective in that it seems like you really represent the truth of what happens, but mostly those people who are public information officers had an agenda specifically, and sometimes we had cover up scandals or get some money for other agencies or things that you needed.
In fact, they have found that voter turnout continues to rise up, and they also look at the kind of outrage-driven thing that gets us to the polls. We do go to the polls because we're upset, and there's some usages of that where they do this kind of stuff just to get us out there. But is that really a good thing to do? Which brings me to the last thing. I have 2 minutes. We're going to finish this at 12 and do our announcements, everything else, because we have a meeting and I'm just moving it along. So what's wrong with all this information? Now, misinformation, disinformation, some of it, of course, is telling you something, and we all have to be aware of that. When you turn on your computer, it's a salesman standing and sitting on your desk trying to sell you something. And it's a way to think about that almost everything you do, even if it just looks like it's information, because we are in the information age, right? Supposedly. And that information, we are a highly information driven species, and people make money off of selling information. The only way to get that is to get you to click on it. And if you're not clicking on it, they're not making money, because they don't make money until they can hit certain levels of followers or subscribers or people liking, and then they can start making money. And if I just sit there and say, you know, things are really not as bad as you think it was. Trump tried to change the judicial system, and actually what most people say is he did not succeed. For most of the courts. In fact, he's done that. He tried to change the laws in several states. It didn't work. He tried to do all these things. They didn't happen. Are you going to click on me? No. Trump is destroying democracy. How many of you believe that? You're going to click on me. You just clicked on me. There you go. And so if I don't say something outrageous, and if I try to be fair and balanced, and I try to present facts that they are in a media-driven environment, and this is we got to understand that this information is media-driven to make money. You have to think about, what are they selling me? And if you come to our little workshop, and there are 3 dates, they're going to start 1 in December and then 2 in January. Bring your laptop if you have it. We're going to show you how to spot fake media. We're going to show you how most of the pictures you see online were ripped off from other things that have nothing to do with what you're looking at, which is frequently we see during the Israeli-Hamas war. A lot of those images were brought in from other things. And for sometimes they just don't have a picture and they're just using a picture, but you got to understand that that's another kind of disinformation or misinformation. That's not what's going on. So we're going to do all of that. We're also going to show you how to look at your algorithms, how to look online and things like that, because it's getting out of control. And it's getting out of control. And the part that upsets me as people like our ethicists is that we are becoming too tribalistic. We are moving closer and closer into tribes. And a lot of this is driving us further into our tribes. We need our collective brain. We need everybody's brain, including those who see the world radically different from us. We need to be able to come together, hear all sides, and present this. When we do studies on collective learning systems versus tribal learning systems, collective learning systems perform extremely better, off the charts, right? Tribal groups that only people talking to themselves in an echo chamber produce far less creativity, far less efficiency, and far less good ideas than people in a collective system in the give and take of what we used to call, or as Adler called it, the marketplace of ideas. Yep. So we have to be careful we're not preaching to the choir, and that we have to make sure that we're actually presenting real information. And as ethical people, that's what we need. We need good decisions about that. In fact, Mutha Krishna, who presents one of the books I eventually want to will be sharing with you, he puts it this way. He says, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find his exact quote. He says, we don't need more information. We just need better, more understandable information. The American scientists came out with the same thing about that. But information helps us make good choices. You can't solve problems without all kinds of information. And so we need, in a complex world with complex problems, we need as much information as we can. And we need to stop the tribalism as much as we can and have a media that actually responds to our needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Kurt. Very interesting and a lot of fun and engaged with the people here in the room and on the Zoom. Thank you for everyone who shared their reflections on that.
To learn more about us, visit our website, ethicalfocus.org, or email us at admin@ethicalfocus.org, and we'll get back to you. To make a donation, go to ethicalfocus.org/donate. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can watch many of our past programs on our YouTube channel.